Please be seated. Your Royal Highness, Deputy Lord Lieutenant, Vice Presidents and Trust officials, honoured guests and members, welcome to the first annual presentation of the WRNS Benevolent Trust and to the Museum of the Royal Navy here in Portsmouth Dockyard. I am grateful to the Museum Director General, Matthew Sheldon, for permitting us to use the venue today, and to the resident team here for all their support in making today possible. Firstly then, I would like to open proceedings by inviting Her Royal Highness to address our honoured guests and members.
Well, thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, pleasure to join you. And here we are a year on from that momentous decision at the 81st Annual General Meeting to become a subsidiary charity of RMC. But this actually marks continuity because it's very similar. Not in that context. It does happen. But in the context of the numbers of people here, the things we will be discussing, reminding ourselves of, and the relevance that the Benevolent Trust still has to all of those ex-RENs. So that part doesn't change. But having just been with the RNRMC, they will have noticed, as you have done, that the changes have happened, and remarkably quickly and successfully. Although I suspect, like every organisation, when you start to clear things out, as you have done from leaving Castaway House, that you discover there are a whole lot of things you didn't know you did in the past, or didn't even know you had, but will also help, maybe here in the museum, stories to tell, issues that perhaps did need more airing, and remind you of what went before, not least of all about how constructive the Benevolent Trust has been and the difference it has made to people's lives. The letters you have, for instance, from your beneficiaries, does really mark and underline the value of the organisation and the way in which you've responded to that need. So it's been a cathartic exercise. Well, I hope it wasn't too bad. But all of those things that have changed. But the stability, the same things are going on, and that's the attention to detail of those who still need help. Delivering through this period has been quite an interesting exercise, of course, because of that. But I know that help and source of comfort to many has continued. Significantly, in 2023, the Trust spent over £168,000 in the delivery of its financial objectives. And that will be covered, of course, by your Chair and Treasurer. But even more amazingly, the legacies have continued to arrive. And you've had £16,000 realised in year, and a further 93,000 in the pipeline for year end. Now that says a huge amount about ex-RENs, their interest, their understanding the value of what the Trust offers, that level of commitment to leave legacies like that to the Benevolent Trust. So a huge amount of responsibility continues for the Trust and what it can do with those funds. Many associations, organisations and individuals continue with fundraising activities, and the Trust remains hugely appreciative and thankful to all members and all of those supporters for those events, for their continued generosity and interest. That is the thing that we need. It's because the interest makes the connections and the network that will bring in the individuals that need the help. We know that is key because we also know that not just the older generations, but quite often when people get into need, they don't want to make a fuss and they don't want to ask for help. And it needs just a friendly pair of ears and a little appreciation to encourage them or to have the confidence to come forward. So every year I tend to say the same thing, but you know that that's true as well, is that keeping your eyes and ears open, that the network really is out there to support those who may need a bit of help but don't really feel they can ask for it. That means we can review their situations and make the offers to help. So from our perspective, from your perspective, the activity and change has been an unprecedented year for the Trust, probably inevitably. But it has been successfully navigated, and there's a lot of hard work has gone into that process. I'm afraid I was guilty of saying just now that if it had been the days of cash and paper work, you could have just handed the cash and the paper files over and moved on. It's slightly more complicated than that now. We hope that the system is better connected, and we worked hard to make that so. But if we want to make the best use of those connections, we still need the eyes and ears on the ground and the ability to communicate through that network to allow us to still make an impact for ex-RENs. I'm sure that you have confidence in the Trust to continue to do that. Your presence here rather supports that. So may I just congratulate and thank those who've been most closely involved in the transition, and just to say well done. But this is about continuity, and we do look to the future to continue the same level of service to those ex-RENs as we did before. Thank you.
Your Royal Highness, on behalf of the Trust members and other members of the audience today, may I take this opportunity to again welcome you to the first annual presentation and thank you for continuing the unstinting and very close interest you've always taken in the Trust and its workings and outputs. I know members are always very keen to hear what you have to say and have the opportunity to meet you in person. Before I go any further, I would just like to introduce the other person on the platform today. Lieutenant Commander Kath Hutton is the Trust's Vice Chair and also for today acting as Treasurer, as Maggie Bolam was unable to attend due to the train strikes. Now, as you are aware, because we mentioned it several times already, this is the first annual presentation of the WRNS Benevolent Trust, and it's not an annual general meeting as we have had in previous years. Now, this change is as a direct result of the strategic move of the Trust under the umbrella of the Royal Navy and Royal Marines charity, a move you, as members, voted through this time last year to ensure the Trust could continue to be run in the most efficient manner for the remaining beneficiaries who could in fact be around for another 40 to 50 years. However, while an AGM is no longer required, I want to take this opportunity to remind and therefore reassure members that while some changes have now occurred in what I would term back office functions and also the application for support process, the Trust has retained its name, its charitable number, a board of trustees made up of former WRNs, a grants committee and full control of its finances. There are no plans to make any more major changes for the foreseeable future. But should you have any questions, concerns, queries at any time, then please contact us and use the contact details provided for the Trust, which are on the web and have not changed since our move from Castaway House. Now, you've already heard that the last year has been very busy with transition arrangements, and they've had to be conducted simultaneously with business as usual. As Chair, I wish to express my sincere thanks to all those involved in transition. There was simply no blueprint or tick-off list to follow, and trustees have had to learn new IT systems and processes and establish new relationships. And I estimate it will take probably another 12 months before everything is bedded in completely. But rest assured, the will is still very much there to make it all happen. Leaving transition aside then, and turning to the year under report, 2023, I will just focus on the key points and issues. In terms of caseworking, the Grants Committee continues to meet in person on average every 2 months. A reduced frequency which matches the number of applications now received. Applications are staffed by the RNRMC team before being presented to the Grants Committee. The overall challenge remains the cost of living crisis, the need to support those in fuel poverty, increasing rents, and the rapidly rising costs for the provision of care. In 2023, the Trust assisted 89 beneficiaries with one-off or regular grants, compared to 110 in 2022. A reduction in numbers would be expected due to the decreasing size of the WRNS population, and they are in line with the most recent report from our actuary. Now, due to the loss of several regular beneficiaries and our inability to complete on some larger, complex one-off cases requiring the input for local authorities, the total value of grants came in short of the original budget we set for 2023 of £250,000 at £168,000. Setting regular grants aside, the highest area of expenditure in 2023 of £15,500 was on medical aids. The Trust has not increased the maximum one-off grant of £4,000 since 2016, and this level continues to meet the need. The flexibility of what's called the weekly support supplement, which may also be used as a temporary measure where an individual's circumstances are expected to improve, remains particularly effective. Similarly, the one-off general amenity grant continues to prove a useful tool. The level of all our grants still compare favourably with those provided by similar charities and are always subject to annual review. Now, at this point, I would normally highlight one particular case of note that was concluded in 2023, but on this occasion I would like to provide just a generic comment about the Care Enhancement Grant, an area which absorbed 35% of our welfare grant spending in 2023, up from 24% in 2022. Now, these amounts are striking when we consider that in 2015 it was just 15% of the welfare budget. Now, while the concept of a Care Enhancement Grant first arose in 1999 in anticipation that there would be increased need to support former WRNS living in care and nursing homes, the need for the first award did not materialise until 2006. In 2009, the enhancement grant was capped at £50 per week and was subdivided to allow assistance not only for those requiring a third-party top-up, but to assist with domiciliary costs when in receipt of care in their own homes. The Trust cap now for helping with cost of care was increased to £100 a week in 2019. And while that remains the standard award, the Grants Committee does have scope to exceed this rate in exceptional circumstances. With the UK covered, in 2020, a further Care Enhancement Grant category was added to cater for our overseas ladies. As example, the Trust is presently helping meet care costs for one resident in Canada, with a second client also in Canada in the offing. In the USA, we assist a beneficiary suffering from cancer with medical costs above those covered by insurance. In South Africa, a lady whose income is insufficient to meet ongoing medical costs and expenses in a care village is also supported now by the Trust. And very recently, we assisted with care costs for a 90-year-old deaf and blind former WRN living alone in Cyprus, who was in desperate need of support. More information on those supported and the impact on their lives will be available on the WRNS-BT website once the annual report has been finalised. And I commend you to read those testimonies because they make good reading and do underline why we exist and what we do. So to allow the Trust to meet its charitable objectives and deliver benevolence, there are a number of organisations, groups and individuals who deserve our thanks. We remain very grateful in particular for the support provided by SAFA, the Royal British Legion and the Royal Commonwealth Ex-Services League in identifying potential applicants and beneficiaries. The casework provided through these organisations can be quite complex, especially when dealing with our younger applicants. Significant background research continues to ensure that the Grants Committee have all the information they need to make the right decisions. The reduction in cases, though, does allow more time and care to be spent on current and individual wider needs of beneficiaries. We are also enormously appreciative of all those who remember the Trust in their wills, and details of the most generous legacies and in memoriam donations received during 2023 will be provided in the Treasurer's report. The Trust remains extremely grateful to the members of the Association of WRNS and the women of the Royal Naval Services for all that they continue to do on our behalf. And as ever, a huge thanks must go to all our trustees, the members of the Central, the Grants, the Finance and the Quality Assurance Committees, our transition team, ambassadors and all those very willing volunteers who support us throughout the year. And sadly, in 2023, we were notified of the deaths of two vice presidents, Rosie Wilson and Fanny Hugel. Both were larger-than-life personalities with fascinating back histories, and they will both be sadly missed. Fuller obituaries on each lady will be available on the website in due course. I thank both of them publicly for their selfless and enduring contribution and engagement with the Trust over many, many decades. In 2023, we also said farewell to a number of trustees and representatives. Euphemia Yates, a Wren Writer Pay between 1964 and 1970, retired as a trustee after 3 years' service. And due to the move of the Trust to the RNRMC, Mandy Lindley retired as their embedded representative on the trustee board. Mandy left service as a leading Wren Writer Pay, serving from 1979 to 1986. Commodore Catherine Jordan also retired as a trustee and vice chair of the Trust after 6 years. But I am delighted to say she returns in a new guise as the representative for the RNRMC on our trustee board. To all those I've just mentioned, I express my gratitude for their selfless support, dedication and commitment to the Trust. It is also appropriate that I make mention at this point of the retirement of the two permanent members of the Trust staff. Sarah Ayton and Roger Collins joined the Trust within a month of each other in 2008 and served for 16 years. The most often asked question I had last year was not about transition, but was about what's happening to Sarah and Roger. But let me reassure the audience once more that both those individuals were very happy to be retiring and had plans for the next stage of their lives. I know members will agree with me when I say that both Sarah and Roger were exceptional individuals, both personally and professionally, and the Trust owes them a huge debt of gratitude for everything they did over many years as the day-to-day face of the Trust. I hope those who attended their farewell dinner in February felt that we did them justice in terms of the gifts and speeches. And in recognition of their service and the esteem in which they are held, both have been granted honorary membership of the WRNS Benevolent Trust and the Association of WRNS, which means they will have the opportunity to join us at future events, and I'm sure they will do so. So that concludes my roundup of 2023, and I shall now call upon our Vice Chair, Lieutenant Commander Kath Hutton, to present the Treasurer's report.
Your Royal Highness, Deputy Lord Lieutenant, Vice Presidents, Trust officials, honoured guests and members. In 2023, the UK again felt the effects of the many conflicts happening across the globe and the subsequent impact on everyday living. Yet despite this, the Trust fared well. The year-end audit reported we have a total net assets amounting to £4,314,000. And you'll be interested to note that 2022 also closed the year with net assets of £4,314,000. Whilst each year the underlying factors may change, these results demonstrate that the Trust continues to be founded on loyal donor support. We have consistent sources of income and effective cost control and appropriate governance. The audit found no material uncertainties or risks that puts any doubt into our ability to continue as a going concern for the following 12 months. And so to the details. We awarded £168,650 in grants a slight reduction on the 2022 figure, but very much in line with our actuarial forecast as the numbers of our members decline. It is reassuring to know, however, that we did put aside a budget of £250,000 to allow for any spikes in applications. We closed the accounts with a total net surplus of £724, a net expenditure of £167,000, and with a gain of £168,000 in our investment portfolio. Of a combined income totalling £173,159, legacies provided us with £16,000, of which Miss Doris Emily Foxton generously left us £11,400 in her estate. There remains a further £93,000 in the pipeline, which we anticipate will all be completed in 2024. In total, we received 23 in memoriam donations from ladies who sought to remember us in their wills. Fundraising from various events throughout the year raised £7,700, an increase from the £5,000 raised in 2022. £12,000 was raised from collection boxes and a further £2,800 from our regular donors, the Association of Wrens and the Royal Naval Association, and our thanks go to everybody who donated so generously. Turning to our portfolio, the aim of the Trust portfolio of investments is to provide the income to meet the needs of our beneficiaries and to generate sufficient growth to counter inflationary tendencies. To that end, the Trust decided it was in the best interest of the Trust to stay with our investment manager during our transition and beyond. The portfolio generated a total of £131,000 of income. This includes bank interest of £6,455 due to the advantageous interest rates. Overall, a good result, with income from our investments exceeding our target investment income for the year of £112,000. During the year, there were a number of changes made to the portfolio, which gained £168,000 during the year, and which was a very good result, given our net loss of £482,000 in 2022. The portfolio valuation at year-end was £3,867,000. The income from our investments is the only constant source of funds and provided approximately £78,000 of that needed to cover our grants. The shortfall in income is met from the many generous donations and legacies that, when combined, ensure we can continue to meet our strategic aims and help secure the future of the Trust. At year-end, we held reserves of £4.3 million, with £467,000 of cash, including £91,000 held on reserve at Brewin Dolphin. Turning to our expenditure, the budget set for general expenditure was £118,000. At the end of this year, this figure was £140,000, mainly because of bringing forward the end of service and pension costs for our staff into the 2023 year. General administration, fees, insurances, rental expenses and subscriptions are reflective of the closing down of our offices in Castaway House and the transfer of our day-to-day business to the WRNS offices in HMS Excellent. Standout other costs are auditors, legal and professional fees at £5,820 and £11,067 respectively, inclusive of all the work carried out to complete the legal obligations and due diligence tasks prior to becoming a wholly owned subsidiary of the WRNS. And notably, those figures were all under the budget for the year. Travel expenses and reimbursements were £3,565 against a budget of £4,000, perhaps indicative of the combination of on-site and Zoom attendance for Trust meetings. Investment managers' fees at £24,222 are reflective of the value of our portfolio. And so to round off expenditure, the 2022 EGM held in HMS Excellent cost a total of £6,216 against a budget of £15,000, less than half what we budgeted for. And finally, I would like to take the opportunity to thank our investment manager, Chris Nolte, from RBC Brewin Dolphin, for looking after the trust portfolio so wisely through these uncertain times. Our auditors, Gibson Witter, Gavin Witter, and client manager, Carla Venables, for their ongoing advice and support, and the finance staff of the RNRMC, who took over our financial administration so seamlessly. And to our many supporters, we give our heartfelt thanks. This ends my report.
Thank you, Kath. Now I would like to turn to our guest speaker for today, Captain Millie Ingham. As Millie is here to cover her remarkable career to date in the Royal Navy, I don't intend to steal her sandwiches and refer to her CV. Rather just say we are absolutely delighted, Millie, that you could join us today, not least because I know you're an exceptionally busy person, and I think I'm right in saying you're actually on leave, technically, at the moment, so thank you. We are very much looking forward to what you have to say, and I'd like to invite you to step forward and address the audience.
Right. Got to do some IT. So I need a communicator to probably help me out. Right. She's going to hit me with that boat hook if I run over time, so...
Turn it round.
Thanks, Jane. Your Royal Highness, Deputy Lord Lieutenant, ladies and gentlemen, this is slightly more nerve-wracking for me than driving through icebergs in Antarctica, because I know how much experience is here in the room. And I also believe Lieutenant Commander Carrie Hands is here somewhere. And I remember when you were in charge of NCAGs and you gave us a brief on X-Course, one of my male counterparts tried to be clever and you gave the most excoriating and terrifying telling off I think I've ever seen. So, so I better get this right. So I'm not going to talk you blow by blow through what I've done in my career, because that'd be super boring for everyone. I can hear my mother saying, no one cares. So she is my biggest critic, and I'm not even joking. So I'm going to take you through some of my full commands, some lessons I learned, which maybe you'll recognise from your own time in your career. And then I'm going to talk about my last ship, HMS Protector, because quite frankly, she's a fabulous ship. And she's got a great female cohort on board. So here we go. So I'm just past my 25th birthday in the Navy, as it were. Definitely not my 25th annual birthday. And I'm not quite sure how all of this happened. And I'm sure a number of my instructors from Dartmouth aren't either. But the picture on the left is a picture of me sat in the captain's chair of HMS Cavalier, which was then in Brighton Marina. And you can see how bossy I looked then. And I'd like to say, we use the word assertive now because it's more empowering. But I was head girl at school and then president of the Law Society. And then I thought, God, I've got to get a job. And at the time, my boyfriend's father had been in the Navy for 34 years. And I thought, that looks all right. And then I went to Islington Business Design Centre and I met a female lieutenant on the recruiting stand. And I filled my forms in that night and then I turned up at Dartmouth. This is my mugshot from day 2 at Dartmouth. You can see my crazy maiden name on here. Rather disturbingly, I look like a fat brown-haired Boris Johnson in this. Shortly after this photo was taken, they said to me, you need a haircut. And I said, but I've just had my haircut and it cost me £65. And they said, go to the barber, she'll do it for £3.50. And she did. And it was so bad, I ended up in tears. And 6 weeks later, when I had my first leave from Dartmouth, I was in the Heads in the Ashley Centre shopping centre in Epsom, where I grew up. And the little boy shouted, Mommy, Mommy, there's a man in the toilet. Okay, so you can see quite how bad my haircut probably was. And I'm still having trouble controlling it now. Right, moving on. I've always been quite willful, and actually I did all right at Dartmouth because the structure the Navy's given me has been really helpful for me. But I got caught mucking about on the bridge in HMS Campbelltown by the captain. We were in the middle of nowhere, to be fair, and we hadn't seen a ship for about 6 weeks. So he sent me, the top left, you can see me, that's me on the bridge, the hangar roof in HMS Campbelltown at the emergency conning position, where he then made me spend the rest of the watch. I was actually trying to hold the chart down as well, and he thought that was highly amusing. So I survived 2 junior officer watch jobs, and then I was NAVs in Manchester. There you can see me doing a RAS. And then in common with many of you, I married someone else in the Navy and went off to my first command, already breaking naval uniform regulations here, but it is freezing. So what did I learn in HMS Exploit? An open bridge in the North Sea in the middle of a storm is a really terrifying place to be. But it did make me a lot better at driving ships, at predicting the weather from the forecast, although I suspect a number of you here are probably better at that than me. Yeah, it gave me a bit of confidence, okay, because I think it's always quite hard working in a largely male environment. You know, you take the knocks and you sort of try and be really brave, but at this stage I was still a little bit lacking in confidence. But I did learn to drive there, so that was great. Then I went to PWO course, Spec N course. I was the navigator of HMS Ocean, and then I went to HMS Middleton, where the lessons I learned were myriad, actually, especially being in command of an all-male ship's company. For those of you who are the mothers of boys, it's probably pretty similar, except there were 47 of them. So I joined in the UK. About a week after I joined, I was at the Leaving Harbour brief, and they said, right, over to Mom for the unberthing. And I said, OK, boys, it's really simple. We're going to spring off and we're going to back straight through the gap. And they all looked at each other and then looked at me. And I made the mistake of asking, is there anything wrong with that? And they said, well, Mum, we've never done that before. Okay, and I was like, oh, God. But I thought, do you know what? Trust your instincts. It seemed the sensible thing to me to do. So I said, no, boys, that's what we're doing. So I was on the bridge roof, and every single senior rate or officer that wasn't on watch turned out on the bridge wing to watch this. Okay, mainly for those of you who've been in the Navy perhaps more recently, you'll know there's a myth that if you're at an incident, you can't be on the ship's investigation. Okay, so anyway, God smiled on me that day, and I sprung off, I backed out, slap bang in the middle of the gap, and the ops officer looked up at me and went, and I just winked at him and I thought, I've got you now. I've got you now. So I was really fond of this team, but they used to just, like, boys will be boys. So the bottom middle picture, that's us demonstrating the blowing up of a mine to an international audience in the Gulf. And they came to me and they said, Mom, we've got this great idea. We're going to put a huge bladder of petrol just under the surface. We're going to put a load of plastic explosives on it, and we're going to blow it up, and it's going to shoot flames into the air. And I was like, no, this is a really bad idea. And they spent hours drawing diagrams, but I think it was the right thing to do. So trust your instincts. And then finally, in this ship, I learned to think a bit more like a man. Okay, I had 2 young officers join my ship on the same day, a man and a woman. And the man came into my cabin first, and I said, tell me about yourself. My God, he was amazing. Okay, and then the female YO came in, and I said, tell me about yourself. And the first thing that came out of her mouth was, I'm not very good at. And I was like, no, stop. Right, we're not going to do this. Okay, and it's just a reflection of, I think, is being in a largely male environment, and you are more conscious about, how you perform. So I spoke to her. I said, right, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to start with something positive. And it was a real lesson for me too. And then when I went on staff course, I made a very good friend from the RAF, and that's now our mantra, think like the boys. So it's about being more confident, putting yourself forward, because that's what the boys do. I mean, quite frankly, I'm surprised that more people haven't noticed how amazing they are. So my next command was 1 PBS. Right, this was Commander 1st Patrol Boat Squadron. This was mad. So when I did it, when I drove a P2000, I was in my 4th job. The Navy changed the rules, and they put people in their 2nd job. That was me mucking about on the bridge roof, okay, into these, which is a bit like giving someone who's just passed their driving test a Ferrari. And in fact, in the 2nd week, I got a letter from the chairman of ICI saying that one of my ships had gone really close to him with a huge wake, and he'd spilt gin and tonic all over himself. So They only did a year, so I saw 40 COs in 2 years, but my God, they were brilliant. I mean, their stationing needs a little bit of work, as you can probably see in the left-hand picture. But they're young, enthusiastic, give people responsibility, and they generally, apart from the boy down here who's holding his bollard, which you probably can't see after he managed to rip it off, he was a bit of a pain, but he's not in the Navy anymore, so don't have to worry about him. After a short, I did this job, it was fabulous, and after a short spell as the military assistant to the Minister for the Armed Forces, I got selected for Protector. So there was some, I don't think any of these ladies are in the room, but obviously it started, I've got to check my notes here, because otherwise I'll get the years wrong. So you've got Sue Moore and Melanie Robinson, who's only recently just left the service, as the first P2000 COs in 1998, and then Vanessa Spiller, who qualified as the first female PO in 97, before becoming the first executive officer of a frigate or destroyer in 2001, and then Sarah West, who became the commanding officer of the first escort in 2012. Now, it didn't end well for Sarah, okay, but I don't think that we shouldn't recognise that she made a great achievement by being the first. So I was really worried going to protect her because I'd had some quite negative stuff on social media before, and I was worried about getting some grief. So you can see the tweet that we put out that said, she's taken over. And then First Sea Lord sent a tweet saying, she's the first woman to do it. And yes, there were some negative comments, but it was largely positive. And then it made me realise it doesn't matter what I think, because actually what this did was show young girls who were thinking about joining the Navy and the women in the Navy that it is absolutely possible. So now it's something that I embrace a lot more. But at the time, I didn't want people to think I got the job because I was a woman. Okay, and I'd worked really hard, and I truly believed I was the best man for this job, okay, the most qualified. And luckily, I mean, I might be a bit of a slow learner, but by the time I got to the ship, I was much more confident in managing the people, driving the ship, dealing with making decisions under pressure. But I think the biggest thing I learnt here was not being afraid to show what I didn't know, okay? Because before I tried to be an expert in everything, and that's almost impossible. And here you can see in the middle one of my engineers trying to explain a line diagram to me, which I was obviously looking slightly confused about. The guy on the right was my XO. We'd been at Dartmouth together, and he was ahead of me at Dartmouth, and he could have been a real pain for me when I got there, because he'd had this ship 3 times, and he was so gracious, and I stood next to him, and my team saw me say, Tom, what do you think? You know, XO, what do you think? And I think actually showing a little bit of vulnerability, but also watching them see me learn, because I'd spent my entire career being told not to drive into things, and all of a sudden I was being told drive into ice, which is a little bit disconcerting. And I had a hydrographic and Met team. I'd never done those jobs. I don't know how to turn a sonar picture into a chart, and so I let them take the lead. But I absolutely loved it. This was, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the ship in a minute. Noel Coward said this at the top, a happy ship is an efficient ship, in the film in which we serve. And I do believe that's true. And it's important not to take yourself too seriously. And sailors make me laugh every day, not necessarily for the right reasons, but you can see here, this is me on the left judging the Senior Rates Fancy Dress competition, which I don't know where they got these costumes from. I mean, the Christmas one after this, there were 2 people dressed as lobsters. So there's the crossing the line ceremony there. You can see my doctor getting some airtime. This is when I just come back from ashore in Antarctica, and I'd asked my engineer to look after my glasses, which he then decided he was going to wear. And the pickle night, which is the Senior Rates equivalent of Trafalgar night, where I was dressed up as a cabin boy, which is traditional for the captain. So the traditions are really important. There are a lot of people who worry about doing some of the traditional things because chucking people in a pool can be a bit dangerous. But I found generally we need to embrace these things because they're part of who we are. So, right, that's enough about me. Let's move on to this fabulous ship, HMS Protector, which is currently in St John's in Newfoundland and about to go for ice trials in the Arctic. So what does the ship do? So I think you can see from the picture on the right why we're painted red, because she's quite hard to see. The picture in the middle is of the most southerly post office in the world. We got a bit of a distress call from them. You might have seen them in the press. There were 5 women running the post office. And they needed help being dug out of 25 foot of snow. So 75 of us rotated through. and dug them out of that snow. And then on the left, you can see some of the ice fields we encountered. Very sadly, there's quite a lot of, there's not a lot of sea ice anymore. Okay, global warming has made the environment very different. So the conditions we were finding were a lot more sort of hard glacial ice that we can't drive into, despite the best efforts of some of my officers of the watch, rather than the sea ice that we used to break through. So the Antarctic Treaty, we're also responsible on behalf of the British government and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office for going to visit foreign bases to make sure that they're abiding by their regulations, that they're not polluting the environment, destroying wildlife. We go out in these fairly flimsy boats, which can be fairly exciting. And you can see the Uruguayans like to let everybody know which base they're in. That's their national flag emblazoned on theirs. And they're next to the South Korean base that actually has a driving range. So there's a bit more development down there than you perhaps think. And then on the left, that's me with the chef at the Ukrainian base. That's the ex-Faraday base, where British Antarctic scientists discovered the hole in the ozone layer in 1985. And we gave that site to the Ukrainians in the late 90s. And those guys had been there for over a year because of the things that are happening in Ukraine. We were shown around by a really lovely young lady who said to me, have you got any shampoo? And so I went back to the ship. We did a whip round of all the girls, and we had face masks going in there and all sorts of stuff just to give them. And we sent them a load of chocolate and just some things to kind of brighten their day. So that's Antarctic Treaty inspections. Surveying, it's not lead line anymore. It's all very complex. We've got the little version, which is called the James Caird, and the top right. We send that away to go sometimes ahead of the ship. So she tells us it's safe as we go over uncharted waters. And then leading Seaman Smith very bravely in the middle, wading through Antarctic water. So this is a tidal gauge where they do 25 hours of observations, but they have to build and set up that themselves and wade out to it every hour to go, and including avoiding the seals, to go and check that. So I'll show you a quick picture. That is underwater volcanoes that we discovered in a place called Protector Shoal. And now we go back and look at them every year, because if these collapse, then South Georgia is at risk, and there's a load of our scientists there. So, but the picture, the colours just show you, red means it's close to the surface. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's more defined. But that's very unprocessed. But the kit on board is absolutely amazing, and we make charts that contribute to the safety of a lot of the cruise ships that are now in the area. This is Rothera, the British Antarctic Station at Rothera, and you can see us using our crane being driven by my coxswain. For those of you who've seen the female coxswain, the film Aliens, she looks a bit like Ripley in the machine. She was my best crane operator, and that's us delivering both scientific equipment, building equipment, and we did a food swap with them because we'd run out of tomato ketchup and they needed frozen vegetables. So we also then took their scientists down to the Avian Islands and to places by boat to have a closer look at some species because they don't have the capability themselves. And we also changed a load of data cards in remote sensing stations so that information could come back to scientists. And everybody's favourite bit, the monitoring of the wildlife. Although I have to say, we were in South Georgia, and they said, if a fur seal comes towards you, you really don't want to be bitten by it. So make yourself really big, and it'll scare it off. So they weigh about half a ton as well. So this thing came lolloping towards me. So I sort of went, like this. Didn't work. It kept coming. So I'm ashamed to say I hit it with my umbrella, and always carry an umbrella. I hit it with my umbrella as the DWO shouted, "Run, Mom!" And then I ran gracefully away. But we also we're really lucky with the humpback whales. So, I didn't know this till I went down there. Humpback whales, their tails are all individual. It's like a fingerprint. So we were able to capture photographs of the ones that we saw and then give those to the British Antarctic Survey. And this very sleepy seal I took this picture in Deception Island, which is an old volcano. And the bit where the lava used to spew out is now submerged, so you can drive in there and you're in a cauldron, basically, which was really, really special. I'm going to show you a video now, which I'm hoping is going to work. So apologies to any vegans. We filmed this in a place called Bijordan Fjord, and we were going by, and we had a fabulous army photographer on board. Long story, but he captured this footage, and I'll just let it do the talking. This is orcas. You can see them sky hopping. And then they work together to make a wave. So it was absolutely, I can't explain to you how mesmerising it is down there. And if you ever get the chance to go, it's worth saving up your pennies to go and see. Right. I suspect a number of you will recognise this lady. Okay, so there's a story behind this. When I was the ops officer in HMS Diamond, it was the ship's first commissioning, and I got put in charge of decorating the wardroom. And I went to the trophy store, and they had the most fabulous portrait of Commandant Talbot, who, as most of you will know, laid the groundwork towards women going to sea. And I said, we've got to have this picture. So she was with us in HMS Diamond, and then I left the ship, and they gave me this to take with me, which has now been almost all the way around the world with me. And if you see here, so there she is in the cabinet in my hunt. There she is when I was Commander 1 PBS. And that's my cabin in the middle in HMS Protector. And that's the Governor of Montserrat, which is also worth a visit. If Sarah Tucker, her name is, she's a really fabulous lady. But we also had the portrait of Dame Vera Matthews, who was the director of the WRNS during the Second World War, which I particularly, I'm an ex-smoker, I was a very heavy smoker. And in that portrait, she's got a packet of fags and an ashtray next to her, which I always rather particularly enjoyed. But when Millie F came to visit the ship, he said to me, I've never seen female portraits on a ship, and I don't think in an army establishment either. So he then has resolved, when he went back to MOD, to get one for his office. So, but I am really conscious of the people who came before us and who made all of this possible for us. And I now also feel the responsibility to pass that on to some of the younger girls. I mean, they generally only phone me when they're in trouble, but I'll take that. So we had my PO electrical engineer on board, came in and she saw the picture at her joining call and she said, oh, my nan was in the WRNS. And when it came round to International Women's Day, I said, right, girls, we should make a film for the ship and show, because we've got a lot of girls on board. So we had a meeting and I said, look, this has got to be your choice. I want you to come up with the idea. And so PA Senate said, well, what I want to do is I want to write a letter to my nan, who was in the WRNS, and tell her what's different. So I'm going to show you the video now. Here we go.
Dear Nan, I'm writing this from Antarctica. Can you believe it? The scenery is breathtaking, the wildlife is amazing, but the people are what makes this trip special. I never thought I would have an opportunity to serve at sea in Antarctica, an opportunity that was unheard of back in your days with the WRNS. The thought of women at sea would send shivers up people's spines in those days, and it just wasn't allowed, but how times have changed. There are women within every department on board who are vital to the ongoing success of the ship. Engineering, catering, logistics, communications, medical, administration, warfare, executive, surveying. Even the captain is a woman. Did you ever think that would happen? We are paid the same as the men and do the same jobs, and I couldn't be more proud to be part of such a great group of women, and I know you would be proud of us too. See you soon. Love, Izzy.
That still gives me shivers. I love that video. And it was all the girls ideas and filming and voiceover. So I just wanted to let you know that, you know, you'll often hear stories about women in the Navy, but the future is really bright. These girls are at sea doing the job. Heidi there with her hot cross buns is currently working at Checkers. She's doing an absolutely great job. Leading Seaman Smith, just the girl wading in the water, just being promoted. The sub-lieutenant on the end, just finishing X-course. You know, these are great women doing a great job. So, and it's all thanks to the path that you laid for all of us. So thank you. And that's it.
Can I shut it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll now ask Lieutenant Commander Jane Pitsey to provide the vote of thanks to our speaker.
Your Royal Highness, Deputy Lord Lieutenant, and honoured guests. Well, your career and developing your team, and that's women and men, in some way reflects on a very small part of the work that the WRNS Benevolent Trust does, in as much as the part of the grant giving is to empower women to find vocational work and therefore develop themselves. So I think developing women is at the heart of the WRNS BT effectively. So, you know, it's always good to hear what you've got to say about that in your own career. Most of you who've been to a few AGMs will know that this is something I get voluntold to do every year, and I always do a bit of stalking ahead of the presentation, so that I get a bit of a flavour of who the guest speaker is. And sometimes I've never met them before, but that wasn't the case for you. So you know, we first met a long time ago when you were undergoing your PWOS training, and I was serving on board HMS Northumberland. And even back then, there were very few principal warfare officers who were female, and getting to be that was really unusual for men, let alone women. And I remember you'd left your trousers behind. But the point of the story is, it's not embarrassing that you forgot your kit because you were somewhere else. But the fact of the matter was, we built just a tiny little spark of friendship, didn't we? You know, I mean, you're 6 foot and I'm 5 foot, and it was hilarious seeing you walking around with your trousers like that. But it was just, and I saw you, and I was a senior 8 at the time, and I saw you and some of the other girls, and I thought, come on, we were so behind you because it was such a rocky road even then. You know, and that's the principle, isn't it? See what you can be, and I think that's where you certainly helped other people to sort of have some faith in their own ability, and that was never lost on me. But who would have thought back in whenever it was, you sat as a laughing cavalier, sat on the captain's chair, that somehow you would end up where you have now, even despite that haircut. What's that all about? And, you know, who would have, your family imagine that you would have been the sort of protector of the Antarctic and, you know, luckily not get snaffled by a fur seal. And they stink. They do stink. Yeah, so, and I would imagine that your exploits in your early years, with your law degree, would have helped you get out of a few scrapes, I'm fairly certain, and kept you out of a pickle, right? So you talk about sort of incremental support, and like I said, that's really something that you've taken on throughout your career, which was really interesting for us to hear. And I know that you mentioned Commandant Talbot, but our lovely Rosie would have been absolutely thrilled to have heard what you had to say, because she was one of the biggest supporters of women that I've come across in my career. She was amazing, and she would have loved to have heard this. But Commandant Mary Talbot, she wanted to see women do extraordinary things whilst maintaining femininity. Now, that seems a bit of an old-fashioned thing to say now, but I think the principle is you're showing people that you can carry on and do what you want to do, but be yourself. You know, so that's what she wanted, but you've modernised that in a way by letting people be who they want to be, and you're not fitting that mould. No one's going to bash you into that square hole and you're round, are they? And I think that's something that is really good for the leadership team to be able to do. So like I said, I did get a bit of gossip on you. I won't reveal my sources, but Apparently, there's a hierarchy in the Ingham household. There's Cato, the Welsh Springer Spaniel. You can find him on Instagram, apparently. Then there's Captain Millie, and then there's Commodore Andrew. So we know that. And I had no idea that you were a Lego nerd as well. Oh, no. And, but most importantly, from all my market research that I've done, is that your kindness and your warmth and your friendship is felt by anyone that you ever work with. And Andrew wants you to pay me lots of money for saying that.
He's in a lot of trouble.
He's in so much trouble, but he's in Plymouth, so I'm okay. So I think really, you're just diamond cut. You really are. You've got a diamond cut determination and wit, and the fact is that you're in the Middleton of you all is soft and gooey. Okay, and we actually do want to hear what you've got to say. And we're very, very grateful, and thank you very much for spending your time talking to us this afternoon. Thank you.
Jane, as always, many thanks for that. Thanks to our speaker. I would now like to formally close the annual presentation and thank you all for joining us today. I hope you enjoy the refreshments available. If you wish to relive this experience or know of other former WRNS who could not join us today, then do remember that a film of the presentation will be uploaded to the Trust's website in due course. Thank you.
Your Royal Highness, Admiral Potts, Commodore Voice, ladies and gentlemen, it now comes to that formal part of this afternoon's proceedings where I invite Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal, as